Hey guys, join me as I build this beautiful buffet cabinet equipped with integrated handles and box joint drawers. Along the way, I encounter not one, not two, but three catastrophic failures throughout the course of this build. Let's check it out. I'm pretty excited about this build because I get to use a lumber that I've only used in one other project, and it is an extremely beautiful but not really common lumber in the building world. I'll tell you at the end of the video, but I'd love to hear your guesses down below. Most of you, I think, are going to pick a certain material, but it is not that. They have a similar pattern, but there are slight differences. Anyways, building the framework of a cabinet, it seems simple, right? You're just creating a box. However, it is critical that you get everything perfectly square and plumb, because from this point on, if there's any errors, they're just going to get compounded, like adding a back panel, for example. If it's not a nice square box, you're going to have to cut your panel at a weird parallelogram, and it's going to be difficult, and it's just going to keep getting worse and worse throughout the whole build. So really take your time and get a perfectly square box. That foundation is so important. Here I'm just squaring up the corners left behind by my dado router bit, and then a little bit of glue here and some brad nails to hold in this back panel that fits so perfectly. This is one of those small things in woodworking that just hit that right button for you. The perfect fit, a little bit snug, pop it in there and it holds itself in place, and the brads are just there to clamp it together while that glue dries. While that glue dries, we're going to move on to the next portion of this build, and this is a new one for me, and that is veneering plywood. The doors on this cabinet are going to be made from cabinet grade birch plywood that are veneered with elm. Now, just like me, I'm sure when you hear the word veneer, you automatically assume that it's a lesser grade or lower quality furniture, because I thought the same thing too. But as I've advanced in the woodworking world and learned a little bit more, there are times and places where using veneers are critical and beneficial. They'll give you a better overall product in the end. Now, the difference between the veneer that you might find on some IKEA furniture versus the shops on veneer I'm going to make here is the thickness of that veneer. I'm using a quite thick, over an eighth of an inch veneer of solid elm that's going to get laminated onto a high quality plywood. Some of the veneer that you see in factory built or commercially built furniture are paper thin, where you just scuff it a little bit and you get to see through that veneer and down into that ugly plywood or particle board substrate. This is not going to be that type of a veneer. So here you see me set up my table or my bandsaw with the little help of this feather board, which is a big time must if you're going to do any veneer work. And then I thought I was really smart with this little jig that I was creating, in which I was going to feed these very rough sawn veneers through my planer and get this perfectly smooth finish that would require minimal sanding and a quick assembly of the doors. However, it didn't work so well. It wasn't secure well enough, and that veneer was kind of flapping its way through the planer, and I got terrible gouges and tear out. So it's on to plan B. The jig, however, was not a complete loss. After a little bit of thought, I figured, let's try running the same jig through my drum sander, which is a little bit more delicate, but will still get me a good end result. And it worked well. It just took a lot more time and passes, but in the end, I got these beautiful shop sawn veneers that were ready to be turned into doors.
So I've gotten to the point where I'm most concerned about this whole build. I was unable to find any elm plywood or elm veneer anywhere, so I made my own veneers. I've never done this before, but I'm going to attempt to edge joint them and then glue them down onto a plywood substrate. So I match these up by grain, trying to get the most similar grain pattern. And there's some very small gaps here and there in these. So I'm going to take my hand plane, sandwich these together, and try and clean up those edges that way. And I got to cut some more because I just learned that whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. I don't know if that's necessarily true or not using plywood, but I'm just gonna try and be on the safe side. So we will put a layer on the front and on the back of the plywood.
This may be a little tricky to see, but I have a piece of scrap wood that is perfectly flat, and then I sandwich the veneers together, and that scrap wood is just giving me a nice wide base to run my planer across for stability, and this worked quite well. With my edges much more straight, it was time to prep for a glue up. I'm going to use some 3M tape here, and this is going to act as a clamp for when I add that glue and allow it to dry secure.
So here you can see that seam is pretty much invisible.
Now's come the time where I'm going to add glue to those seams, and you can glue this as is directly onto plywood, and you probably won't have to worry about those seams coming apart. I wanted to play it safe, so I added a little bit of glue to every joint. And then when you let it lay back flat, it actually squeezes that glue out and you get a good strong adhesion. After this glue dries, then I'm going to take the whole panel and glue it onto the plywood. I also grabbed a rag to clean up any of that squeeze out because I want to minimize how much sanding I got to do to these veneers.
I put a solid piece of wood that's about 1.5 inches thick on one side of these cabinet doors because the client wants me to do an integrated handle, which will kind of dig into here. This is going to be covered in a face veneer, but if you don't put this in now, when you cut that integrated handle, you're going to see the plywood into the handle, which might look cool, might look crappy. I wanted to play it safe, so I have this solid piece here for where that handle cutout is going to be.
So I'll chalk that one up as a rookie mistake. Do not have the veneer overhanging your plywood substrate or you're going to have issues. After having some success with the vacuum bag, I was on my fourth and final drawer. I thought everything was good to go and I left for the evening only to come back to see major trouble.
Well, I'm gonna chalk this one up as a rookie mistake. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing that. This is my first time using a vacuum bag, I guess, but the seal must not have been as good. I had used it 3 times. I don't know if you have to replace those seals every time. I came and put this in the clamps. It's the 4th drawer. The first 3 went perfect. Of course, the last one, when I think I've got it all figured out, disaster strikes. So this piece right here I just ripped off, but it wasn't even attached. It was bowed all the way up. There's a huge bubble in this. I don't know if it'll focus enough for you to see it, but this is like a big lump right here. So I have to plane this all down and make all new veneers, which really, really sucks. So I decided to make the handles all bigger, right? It's about the only thing we can do. And truthfully, they needed to be a little bit bigger. They were too small, so that one was fine. And then another issue pops up. Of course, I realized this too late, but see this darker tab here? I've started to mark where that tab is. This thing will wander, and of course I wasn't watching it. So as I was going through making those handles just an inch or two longer, it was dropping. Catastrophic failure.
So as that bit was dropping, you're looking at this from the opposite side of which it was going through my router table. It got closer and closer to the edge of that top and eventually worked its way all the way through and left this paper thin edge. So now I have to figure out how to redo these doors. Feeling extremely defeated, this was my last ditch effort to try and save this door. I took my table saw and cut out a little rabbet into the top of the door, and then I took my handheld planer. It's a router planer that I got from Jonathan Katz Moses to clean up this edge. This was the perfect tool for the job. I followed up the router plane with a shoulder plane. We're getting a lot of hand tool work here to clean up that edge and prepare it for a glue up. I don't know any other tool that would have done a better job or a combination of tools than these two. This just goes to show sometimes hand tools are better than power tools. After getting this edge nice and cleaned up, I had a little bit of leftover veneer and I was able to glue and clamp that to the door.
Well, I've got both of those little pieces clamped out. Nothing I can do now. Wait until morning, and fingers crossed that seam doesn't look like complete shit. And also fingers crossed that I can run it through, put that integrated handle in without that piece I just glued on ripping off. So try to put a clamp pretty much every single inch on that. Hopefully we get some good bonding, and I'm gonna go drink an ice cold beer and contemplate all of my life's decisions.
The next morning, things were really starting to look up after a couple passes through my drum sander. I'll let you be the judge of the results of this repair. I also came up with a solution to my really crappy router table lift. This little piece of tape to prevent that thing from spinning around while the motor is running. I also put up more defined lines so I didn't go past my cut lines to ensure that these handles came out perfect. It's time to install some soft close bloom hinges to these doors, and they're ready for some Rubio monocoat. There's only two major things left in this build. It's starting to come to life. I need to weld up a steel base, and I also need to build two drawers that are going to be hidden behind these doors. All right, we're back to the wood shop, and this project is going to throw us one last curveball. Of course, it's going to. So I have the Bloom undermount drawer slides, and I want these drawers to be hidden back behind the doors. And the issue is that if I pulled the drawer out like this, they would hit the hinges of the doors. So I added this little block, it's a little spacer to get the drawers out away from that hinge to allow it to open and close freely. Up next, it's time to work on the drawers to the cabinet. And if you're not familiar with this joinery, it's called a box joint or a finger joint. I've never done it before, but I bought this jig to make it a little bit easier to do. These ended up being a focal point to the build, and I couldn't be happier with the decision to move forward with some form of joinery on the drawers. As think having that exposed end grain is going to look so cool when you open the doors to this cabinet and see that joinery. Now, I wanted to share a little tip with cutting the bottom panel for your drawers. And if you just take two pieces of scrap wood like these here, and then slide them into your dado that you cut all the way around them, and then take a pencil and just mark where those edges meet, you can then remove those two pieces of scrap material and realign them and measure to get the perfect length. Sometimes the way those dados are hidden behind the sidewalls of the drawer, it's a little difficult to get a perfect fit, but this is a nice little tip that'll get you that perfect result without much trouble.
I've done this style a few times. I really like it. I think it's just a classic, timeless design, and it just kind of fits the theme of this particular build. So I'm going to cut out this portion here, and instead of having like some hardware, which wouldn't fit inside that cabinet anyways, because I need this drawer to be nice and flat and flush, this is a great way to do that. And to be honest, I don't know if I just haven't found the right stuff or the right brand, but I have a really difficult time finding hardware that I like. Oftentimes I feel like it looks cheap and junky and kind of pulls away from the whole idea of having like a piece of fine furniture. So I always encourage customers to let me try integrated handles of some sort. I just feel like it fits the piece better and just looks better overall. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below.
I've really started to use templates more often in my woodworking, making this template out of some plywood in case you make any mistakes and you can get it perfect and then just transfer it with a template or a flush trim bit. And we're almost finished with these drawers. I'm using the Bloom undermount drawer slides for this. And I highly, highly recommend if you're going to be working with these drawer slides to purchase this little jig. It's like 40 bucks, but it allows you to line up all of the holes that you need to pre-drill perfectly, and it just works so well. These are the best hardware you can get for cabinetry.
Sorry I forgot to film most of this, but I just put threaded inserts in the bottom of the cabinet, and I'm going to use a bolt and a washer that's going to go up through the steel and into that. Always remember to make oversized holes if you're going to use this method. It works really, really well, but you can't have the hole the same size as your bolt. That wood needs to be able to move a little bit, and oversizing that hole allows room for seasonal change.
Boy, what a project this has been. Some ups and downs, a lot of curveballs, but in the end, I am so pleased with how this all turned out. I hope you guys enjoy it. Please like and subscribe, comment down below. It means so much to me. We'll see you on the next build.